And welcome to the 3 Knockdown Rule. This is Steve Kim, joined by the man of the hour, Mario Lopez, talking boxing. We got 3 major subjects. And Mario, let's get right into this. Past weekend, Sergey Kovalev once again stakes his claim as the best light heavyweight in the world, stopping Jean Pascal in 8. Mario, bottom line is very simple. Can anyone with a straight face say that Adonis Stevenson is the light heavyweight champion of the world and not Kovalev?
Not if they're being honest with themselves, and not if they're being maybe if they're delusional. The thing I love about Kovalev is he's traveled to his opponent's homeland, if you will, many times now, and has knocked them out. Glenn Johnson obviously sort of coined the Road Warrior phase, but I think this is the new age Road Warrior. And what's not to like about this guy? He's got the Crusher symbol that looks like Kmart logo.
And he's no blue light special.
That's right. Nice, Kim.
Yeah.
Are we looking forward to those sort of sound bites?
All the time. All the time.
So he's obviously powerful, and he's obviously heavy-handed, but what I think is extremely underrated with him is he's really fundamentally skilled, and he's got excellent technique, and I think he showed with Pascal, who is a very athletic guy, strong guy, and very awkward, and he was able to catch him with these looping sort of counter right hands and have mild success, but never really hurt him, never really buzzed him. But he took a guy who was there, and I believe he was wearing black boa on his trunks to sort of symbolize a black Rocky Balboa, if you will. And he took a guy who's a tough out, had never been stopped, never been dropped. Dropped him once and ended the fight. And I know there was a little controversy regarding when Pavone stopped the fight.
Black Boa was about to become Apollo Creed in Rocky IV. I thought that was a perfect stoppage.
So did I. I think Max Kellerman was one that alluded that maybe he should.
He was out on his feet, Mario. He was out on his feet.
He was totally out on his feet. But my point is, with Kovalev, he showed again what a strong amateur background can do for a fighter in these certain predicaments. He was poised, he was confident, he used his jab beautifully as a rangefinder to mix it up, to set up the looping overhand rights, the straight rights, hard jabs, and he took out a real tough customer and had to use a lot of weapons in his arsenal. And he's a humble guy and very entertaining fighter. And the fact that he fights, he's active, he goes out there and he's out on the road doing it against very tough opponents in their homeland and taking them out. He is
Mario.
He's one of the most exciting fighters in the game today.
He's the new Mel Gibson of boxing. He is the Road Warrior. When Nathan Cleverly went over to Europe, smashed him.
Right.
An hour from Philadelphia, Atlantic City, tamed Bernard Hopkins, just completely outboxed the master guy, which was stunning.
A lot of people.
Then Jean Pascal in his backyard of Montreal just obliterated him. And you said this about Pascal. I call him awkwardly athletic. Right. He's Roy Jones-ish. And it all came back to the fundamental jab. Now, let's be real. We know what's going on in boxing with the division, with the PBC, Al Heyman.
And by the way, to interrupt you really quick, Pascal showed a lot of heart, and he showed a lot of heart in that fight. And it was a very entertaining fight for that division, especially. But he showed me a lot of heart. He's a tough guy, and obviously in his hometown, which coincidentally happens to be the hometown of one Adonis Stevenson.
That's my next point. Do you think, no matter what Adonis Stevenson says, all these Heyman guys relates to guys like Golovkin and Kovalev, who are these killers within the division? Mario, don't they remind you of that kid that taunts the angry rabid dog at 10 feet knowing the chain only goes 9?
Beautiful analogy yet again, Steve Kim.
That's what I do. That's what I bring to the table. That's why you brought me on, Lopez.
I think the politics of boxing are what they are at the moment, and it's sort of a double-edged sword. We're able to have all these wonderful shows on terrestrial TV right now, which hasn't been the case, and on these broadcast networks like CBS and NBC, and in all these ancillary cable networks like True TV and Spike, and I love it for the sport. However, ironically, I think because of the politics, we're not going to be able to see a lot of these fights
You know what it reminds me of? And I'm not a wrestling fan from the 90s, but in the 80s, I grew up on Roddy Piper.
Well, so did I. Are you kidding me?
Piper's
That's a
Pit.
podcast for another day.
Piper's Pit was the greatest thing.
Well, I was more of a Hulk Hogan, Jimmy Snuka guy, but go on.
Yo, coconut. But anyway, the thing that it reminds me of, in the 90s, it became WCW and the WWE two parallel universes where Ric Flair...
Well, in the 80s, to your point, it was WWF and NWA.
Right,
so my point
is...
Nature Boy Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes?
Yeah, but I just wonder, is that good for boxing, having two separate parallel universes? I don't think it is.
Well, I also don't think a model like the UFC is good for boxing either.
Nope.
When you have a total domination, which seems... that at least seems like a blueprint that Al Heyman's trying to emulate right now.
Black Dana White?
Yeah, I don't think that's extremely healthy for the sport either, though. So, it's like I said, it's a double-edged sword because I think we're getting to see it on so many different platforms now. Mainstream sports shows are covering it more, and there's more sports fans that are going to become aware of it. But
there's a but.
But for the hardcore fans and for the purists and for people who really love and follow the sport no matter what, there's going to be a lot of matches that unfortunately I think aren't going to be made at the moment.
We might get more boxing. We may not get the best boxing, and there's a clear distinction. Going back to Kovalev, you know what's funny? And we're big Golovkin advocates. We're Team GGG. But let's be honest about it. I think Kovalev has accomplished more within his division than Golovkin. I think it's clear. He's had better dance partners thus far.
He's had better dancers, but it's not to blame Golovkin either, because he's had willing dance partners, and for some reason the mystique or the fear has not been there, or maybe the
opportunities.
The opportunities, and the fighters don't have the opportunities to really have the luxury to avoid him, and now he's created quite the following, and it becomes much more of a financial incentive for these other fighters. Speaking of which, I know one of your favorite fighters, Andre Ward, has been talking a lot about...
We have to talk about him. You had to bring him up.
Well, because I think that's a fight that could be made, being that they're both under the HBO umbrella, and he's at 168 and has pretty much done all he can in that division.
Mario.
And I don't think it's inconceivable that him going up to 175, that would be an appealing fight.
But Ward has made it clear, I'm staying at 168 even though he's cleaned out his division, and that's his right. Second of all, he's trying to be a Conaloob. He wants tune-ups. He wants tune-ups for a lot of money. In fact, more money than Golovkin and Kovalev are getting paid. He got $2 million for fighting Edwin Rodriguez, who's basically just a cut above a club fighter.
And God bless him for it. So I'm interested to see how this new relationship with Rock Nation, which we should talk about too, and big signings like Andre Ward and Miguel Cotto. Those are experienced seasoned fighters who have been loyal to the promoters, more so Cotto, in the past, and to see them sort of make this transition. I mean, is it again a good sign for boxing that we're now having more chefs in the kitchen, if you will, or is it a bad sign that there's not as much loyalty?
Mario, there's an old saying, too many chefs can spoil the stew. We're moving on here. 3 Knockdown Rule. Steve Kim with the star of the show, Mario Lopez.
Well, about that, I'd like to think of it as more co-stars.
Well, I'm Derek Fisher to his Kobe, so let's just be honest as we run our version of the triangle.
All right.
May 2nd at the MGM Grand. Mario, we have been boxing fans and followers for a very long time. I'm not saying this is the best fight ever, but is it the biggest fight in terms of public interest that you can recall?
Obviously, at the moment, it is. That I can recall, I remember De La Hoya Trinidad.
1999.
1999 was at the Mandalay Bay.
Not a single ticket sold to the public, by the way.
That's right. I got lucky that day.
That you know Oscar.
That I knew Oscar. I happened to be in the front row for that fight. Until this day, I thought he did more than enough to win that fight. I will go on record saying I thought he did more than enough to win that fight. Do you agree with me?
I thought Oscar squandered that fight. Last 4 rounds, I thought he blew. Because I thought the first 8 rounds were much closer.
I'm not good at math, but still 8 out of 12 wins you a fight, does it not?
Lopez, hold on. We're going to have our first fight
I agree that he could have that he could have done more the last 4 rounds. Nevertheless, I didn't think he did enough to lose. And this is not the friendship or Mexican in me talking. I really do. Honestly, Kim, you look at that fight, you think Trinidad did enough to win that fight? Just answer that question.
The first 8 rounds, Oscar was winning.
That's not what I asked you.
He was not winning 8-0. I thought he was winning 5-3, and then he lost the last 3 out of 4. So I think it's at least a draw or a close fight.
Who did you think won the fight? That's my question.
Viva Puerto Rico.
Oh, come
Trinidad.
on.
I do.
Come on. Now your credibility is being shot. Never at one point did I feel Trinidad was in control of that fight. I felt Oscar gave those last few rounds away, and he didn't need to, and his conditioning was there. But anyway, that's not. I don't know how we segued into that. That was the last big fight that I remember. 2 undefeated champions. Okay, and it was the fight of the Millennium. I remember it was being billed. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I thought it was more overhyped than the K2 virus, or 2K, whatever that was. Because that was a dud. Pacquiao Mayweather.
The difference between Pacquiao and Mayweather.
Can this be a good fight though?
I think now, ironically, 5 years, 6 years later than when it should have originally taken place, when both of them were in their physical prime, I think now it lends itself to being a more entertaining fight.
Agreed.
And I also think that, it's funny because I also think that if you take a Pacquiao that went through the gauntlet of De La Hoya,
Hatton,
Cotto, and just destroyed those guys. And by the way, similar opponents that Mayweather had, it was very close.
But that's
split decision win.
But that's based on style, Mario.
No, but what I know, and the split decision win, and then obviously we know he struggled with Cotto, and he fought Hatton above his 140 weight class.
Yes, he did.
Had him come up. So with that said, you take that Pacquiao to me was pretty damn invincible at that point. Okay, now you add a few more wars on him. You obviously add the devastating KO by the hands of Marquez. You know, psychologically, we know you add this whole new spiritual sort of reawakening that he's had. Then it's not. Let's be honest, it's not the same Pacquiao.
No,
but at the same time, hold on. At the same time, you still see a Mayweather now that, as crazy as his antics are, the guy is always like in phenomenal shape and is a gym rat. But you saw a guy get tagged a lot more from a slow, plodding,
methodical
one-dimensional telegraph punching Maidana. Now, granted, he's very awkward to his benefit as well too, and maybe it took a while to figure it out. But I was at that fight, and I've never seen him get touched a lot. So then you ask yourself, well, wow, if Maidana could connect that, what could Pacquiao do? So it makes it intriguing.
3 years ago, Marcos Maidana, the only time he lands clean leather on Mayweather is when they touch gloves before the fight, in between the referee.
So is it age that you think?
No one has outrun age in boxing. People have staved it off like Hopkins, but he's 38 years old now. And Mayweather, in my opinion, if you really look at him, the biggest misnomer with Mayweather right now is the stereotype that he runs around the ring. He really doesn't. If you watch him, Mario, he works in small, contained areas of the ring. And what has Freddie Roach said? His legs aren't there. I believe Manny still has very quick feet. I still believe he also works in volume. When you said this earlier, when fighters lose a couple of inches off their fastball and the reflexes aren't as good, they're not quite as elusive, that's when fights get better. I actually think, and maybe I'm nuts, maybe I'm the heretic here, this fight from a pure action standpoint is better in 2015 than 2010.
I agree with that statement from a pure action standpoint, but if you ask me who I think would win, I feel it's different taking place in 2010 than it is right now in 2015. Does that make sense?
I don't disagree, but you know what the shame of it all? And I looked it up last night. This fight was first negotiated for 2010. Last I checked, it's 2015. I think the shame of it all, from a historical perspective and for the fans, is that if you look at Ali Frazier, from 71 to 75, they fought 3 times. Morales, Barrera, and Pacquiao, they all had their rivalries within a contained amount of time, and we really got to know a lot about each other. These guys are fighting once in a 5-year stretch with no guarantee of a rematch. I think that's where the public and the boxing fans have been deprived.
But Mayweather has a history, and I guess to his credit, and God bless him for it, of selecting his opponents just at the right time. Either towards the end of the rope and had a long run and they've established a name, or they've come up a weight class or two. He didn't fight Margarito, which at the time he had his biggest payday offered at $8 million. Remember that one, Margarito?
Freitas.
He didn't fight Freitas. He didn't fight Costazoo. Avoided Paul Williams.
Joel Casamayor.
Miguel Cotto after he was destroyed by both Margarito and Pacquiao. And by the way, that was a tough fight. So he's been so now he's seen Pacquiao get knocked out. He's seen him have this wear and tear. He feels he slowed down just enough to be able to to finally take the fight. But here's the difference that I think. Okay, and when Pacquiao, you ask him, he was asked, is this your most dangerous opponent? And he said, no, the most dangerous, the one that I feared the most was De La Hoya, Miguel Cotto, and Margarito, right? And they said, really, over Mayweather? And the reason I feel for that is heavy-handed guys that can cause some damage, and they're physically much bigger. The difference between Mayweather and Pacquiao, to me, too, when you're going to face someone like a Pacquiao and a Golovkin, you can get fucked up. You know there's going to be some damage that's going to be occurred. Bones broken or knocked out. You don't fear that with Mayweather. You can get outpointed. You can make to be looked bad, but there is not a fear in that. You know what? I'm going to get some damage, or I'm going to be in a fucking fight.
And kids,
that's not the case.
And kids, we just want to apologize for that foul language of Mario Lopez. He's very, very passionate about this.
Yeah.
But I've always said about Mayweather.
That was for the layman. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Though?
Yes.
He's more of like a tough puzzle. You get frustrated because you can't figure him out.
Right.
Whereas you fight someone like Pacquiao or Golovkin, you know there's going to be some damage.
Well, it's the difference between being hurt and being riddled, and I'll say this again about Manny Pacquiao. He's the greatest matchmaker since Teddy Brenner, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about that on the 3 Knockdown Rule with Steve Kim and Mario Lopez. And we have to talk about this, and we may have to step away from each other because this is going to get very heated. This recently was the 25th anniversary of a historic fight, which truly is one of the best I've ever seen.
The best fight ever.
March 17th, 1990 at the Las Vegas Hilton, a day, quite frankly, that'll live in infamy. Okay? Meldrick Taylor was robbed of his rightful glory against Julio César Chávez.
I'm about to punch you right in the face,
I am
like
just
Chavez did in that 12th round.
I am disgusted by Richard Steele to this day.
Okay, listen, I'm disgusted with you. I'm disgusted with you now at this moment.
Excuse me.
Honestly, I don't know why there's a debate.
What?
I don't know why there's any form of controversy.
Oh, God.
Okay? Meldrick Taylor had the opportunity to answer and say he was okay. He refused. He couldn't. He was incapable, and Richard Steele looked him right in the eyes, followed him with hands on his shoulders, and made the right call. Yes, Taylor may have landed twice the amount of punches, which, by the way, was a record at the time for punches thrown in a championship fight, but Chávez inflicted more than twice the amount of damage.
No argument. Now,
hold on a second.
No argument there.
You know what also is not an argument? The facial fractures that he suffered, the peeing of the blood, the concussive symptoms that he had, the 4 days in the hospital that he spent afterwards. That's why Taylor was a shell of himself, because Chávez literally beat the prime out of him in that one night.
I do not disagree.
And listen, Freddie Roach, you respect Freddie Roach, knows a little about boxing, right? Who was at that fight and coincidentally sat next to Fernando Valenzuela, LA Dodger pitcher that night.
Nice
footnote right there. He was at that fight, and if you ask him in person, which, by the way, the HBO commentators were completely biased that night.
Wow,
completely
Mario.
biased, and they were. If you look at it with the sound off, it's a whole nother fight. Completely biased that night. He tells me going into the 12th round, he had the fight dead even. Okay. That's someone who was there, someone whose opinion I trust, and someone who knows boxing. And that's why he may have been winning the small battles, but Chávez won the war at the end.
Let me counterpunch. First of all, after that, I no longer respect Freddie Roach. Okay. Second of all, I don't disagree with any of what you say about the damage. I really believe it was a close fight, up for grabs, and I believe that you're right. March 17th, 1990, that version of Meldrick Taylor that we saw for 9 rounds, it dissipated.
And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're
exactly right, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. But you know why that fight was so special? And aside from the dramatic ending, and aside from the ebbs and flow, which make boxing so great, you had 2 young, undefeated fighters in their prime facing each other. When do you see
And by the way, Mario,
these days?
regular HBO.
Yes.
That's another thing.
Yes.
But let me go back to Richard Steele, who, by the way, you spell it Steal.
Is this American sort of biased opinion you're giving me right here?
Yeah, okay, super Mexican. But here, the other issue. The other issue is that it's a prize fight. He got up at 3.5.
No, he didn't. Yes, he got up at 5.5, and I'll bet you money on that because I've seen the fight. No, he didn't. He got up at 5.
We will do.
You want to put some money on that?
You know what? We are going to examine this like the Zapruder film.
We're going
to go frame by frame.
Go ahead. Bottom line.
And then Lou Duva got up on the ring apron and he distracted him. My point is, it doesn't matter.
Whose fault is that?
Okay, that's Lou Duva's fault. But in my opinion, with 2 seconds left, after what they had been through, the magnitude of the stakes, you allow that fight
You
to
don't
continue.
allow
Yes,
crap,
you do.
and let me tell you why. You don't allow. That's like saying in this past Super Bowl, you know what? The Seahawks got so close, they were on the goal line. We should have allowed them to come. You know what I mean? We should have allowed.
How is that?
How is that? I was like, you're saying because he came so close, they weren't able to get in, right? They had 4 tries, they weren't able to get in.
I just want to explain to our great audience.
Hold on, let me interrupt you for a second. Richard Steele,
Steal.
He had a fighter who was severely hurt. If you looked at Taylor, by the way, in that 11th round,
it's boxing.
No, hold on a second. If you looked at him, he was severely damaged, and they've interviewed Steele, and he goes, "You do not the bone crushing punches that Chavez was inflicting throughout the thing." I was debating going, and he goes to the corner. Are you okay? And if you see, he goes to the corner. He's checking in with him. It came out of nowhere. He ate a thunderous right hand as he went down. One more punch. What if that could have ended and been a fatal night?
At 2 seconds left. But let me just say to our fine audience.
It's irrelevant. Does Steele know how much time there is left?
Yes, because he was looking at the red light.
No, he wasn't. He was looking at his fighter like he's supposed to. The referee is not supposed to be worried about the time. He's not supposed to be worried about the circumstance. All he's supposed to be worried about is the safety of the fighter.
I agree.
That fighter went down. He asked him twice if he was okay.
No.
He said no. Case closed.
No, the case is not closed.
Yes, it is closed.
For a fine audience, I just want to say that every Mexican, like Mario Lopez growing up, they had 3 pictures in their house. One of the Virgin Mary, the second of Vicente Fernandez, and the third of Chavez. So the bottom line is he's not able to give.
Now you're getting racist.
He's not able to really rationally discuss this.
I am rationally discussing.
Meldrick Taylor.
Nobody deserves anything,
what
Kim.
Do you mean?
Nobody deserves anything.
Earned the right.
He should have said, "I'm okay."
Well, he got distracted.
Well, then whose fault is that? Then that's his team's fault for messing up.
In your opinion, based on the fact that Richard Steele, many believe that he was biased towards Don King. If the role,
that's conspiracy theories. That's all conspiracy theories.
I think Meldrick Taylor didn't deserve it. I thought he earned the right to go those last 2 seconds.
You know what he earned the right to do? To say he was fine, and he didn't. Case closed. And I think the fact that they had a rematch 4 years later, and by the way, he was only 26, 27
Taylor was
years
shot.
old. Who made him shot? Chavez.
I don't disagree.
Okay, then why are we having this discussion?
Let me put you on the spot here. Did Chavez beat Whitaker?
You're trying to switch. Now you're switching.
Won't answer the question. Won't answer the question.
That was a draw, if I remember. At that fight. Now listen, why are you trying to? We're talking right now about the 25. That's a conversation for another day.
I didn't know I was doing the show with Mario Suleiman.
Hold on, that's a conversation for another day. That's a conversation for another day.
So a draw, huh, Mario?
No, I said if I remember, that was ruled a draw.
How did you have it? How did you?
That's for another podcast. I pretty much have proven that there's no controversy. And that the greatest fight of all time was ended in the right way. No debate 25 years later. Thank you. Sign off, Kim.
Still disagree. All right, that's the 3 knockdown rule. This is Mario Lopez and Steve Kim saying goodbye, everybody.